Hi, I'm Liz and I'm currently on lockdown in Malaysia. I'm not Malaysian, I'm actually South African. I just happened to be in Malaysia when shit got real. I wanted to give an update to my friends and family on how I've been doing in Malaysia in lockdown, and I've had a hectic couple of days, so I wanted to talk about them. But rather than making people stare at my face while I talk, I thought, let you watch me drawing a mandala instead. So I hope you enjoy the video. And if you get annoyed by my voice but want to keep watching, just mute. So Malaysia's been on lockdown for about a week now. And up until yesterday, I was sharing my lockdown experience with my Airbnb host. I was meant to stay with her until the lockdown lifted, which originally was going to be on the 31st of March. But as she's also not a Malaysian citizen, she had to make some dramatic changes to her travel plans. She thus informed me on Tuesday, the 24th of March, that I needed to find somewhere else to stay. She was really sweet about it, and I completely understand her situation as well. But it did put me in a bit of a predicament. Because at first she said that she would be leaving on Saturday. I'd already booked a different Airbnb in the same town for a few days after the lockdown, because before all this got serious, I hadn't really gone out to do much sightseeing. I reached out to the host of that next Airbnb, got the go-ahead to change, and within minutes of changing my start date of that booking from the 31st to the 28th, she came to me and said it looked like the only flight she could get out of Malaysia that didn't go through Singapore was for Wednesday, aka tomorrow. This was kind of rough for both of us. Her problem was that Singapore had announced they were closing their borders. She was originally meant to go spend a couple of weeks in Singapore after her Malaysian visa expired for business and so forth, but because of them closing their borders, she now had to go back home to Belgium. And I really don't envy her that journey. Having to travel during this period is extremely stressful for several reasons, not least of which is the risk of infection. As for me, I immediately contacted my next host again and asked if I could change my booking to start tomorrow. He was very helpful and understanding, and I absolutely will give him the highest rating Airbnb has for me to give him for how supportive he's been. But leaving tomorrow meant that I had to get myself in check and actually pack my stuff. I didn't need to pack up a whole apartment like my host did, but I'd been staying in that apartment for a little over a month by then, and being under the impression that I still had about 2 weeks left there, I wasn't really in a packing mindset. That might sound weird, a packing mindset. But the thing is, I hate packing. I've gotten better at it over the past few months, but I still hate it. And on top of that, I had just put a load of laundry in the washing machine. It all worked out in the end. My laundry managed to get mostly dry during the night. I was able to get a taxi to the new Airbnb, and my taxi driver was a delight. We had a really lovely chat. And I realized as I was talking to him how often I have taken the ability to communicate with strangers for granted. You see, I'm an introvert, so I generally don't like talking to strangers very much. And when I lived in China, the fact that I couldn't really communicate that well with strangers kind of suited me for that reason. I do speak very, very basic Chinese. I can communicate things that I need in order to survive, but I never reach conversational Chinese. Thus, the experience of having a lovely chat with my taxi driver isn't one I've really ever had before. And as soon as he dropped me off at my new Airbnb, I realized that might have been the last face-to-face chat I have with someone for quite a long time. As I mentioned, the original end date of the lockdown in Malaysia was supposed to be the 31st of April. Shortly after checking in, my new host informed me that the government had just announced they were extending the lockdown to the 14th of April. My new Airbnb is not a homestay. It is a kind of guest house / hostel setup with only private rooms. As far as I can tell, there are other guests. I know this mostly because of the shoes by the front door. I've seen one other guest, but he hasn't been very friendly. I tried saying hello to him, but he looked almost taken aback by it. The locals I have met around town while on supply runs have all seemed friendly as usual, but foreigners seem to be taking the social distancing thing a little too seriously. I don't mean that we shouldn't be avoiding physical contact with people or objects. We definitely need to take responsibility for not inadvertently spreading the virus. But saying hello and having a friendly chat from 6 feet away is not going to infect you with COVID-19. I think at this time we need to see friendly faces more than ever. I feel especially strongly about this given that I have a rather intimate history with depression. I am so extremely grateful that I am currently going through a period of good mental health, but there are many others who aren't. And so many people who don't really have experience with depression might start experiencing it for the first time due to this necessary isolation. I therefore think that being friendly to strangers during this time is really important. A smile also isn't enough anymore because when we're out in public, we should be wearing masks. And the one downside of that is that we can't actually see when someone is smiling. Yesterday, as my previous host was helping me carry my things down to the taxi, she said something funny and I found myself having to say to her, "I am smiling at you." This is a very weird time we are living in. It is hard for everyone, but it might be harder for some than for others. And as I now prepare myself to spend the next 20 days in complete isolation, I have to admit that my fear of relapsing into depression is quite strong. I'm willing to risk it though, because I fully support self-isolation for the sake of flattening the curve. And I get extremely annoyed when I see people ignoring their government sanctions and restrictions. Like, is your freedom of movement really more important than everyone else's right to health and survival? Stop being so damn selfish, Evangeline Lilly. And religious leaders encouraging congregations to gather in prayer makes me just as angry. Yes, prayer is extremely important, especially during times like this. But God can hear our prayers just as well when we pray from home. Malaysia's numbers were pretty low until a prayer meeting attended by about 16,000 people was held at a mosque outside Kuala Lumpur. Since then, the number of infected has tripled and there has been 10 deaths. And South Korea also had a dramatic jump in cases after one infected woman attended a church service that led to an additional 400 people from that same church service being infected. My home country of South Africa just went into lockdown preemptively because over Easter every year, thousands of members of the African Zion Christian Church migrate across the country to a place called Maria for a special Easter service. If an outbreak occurred at that service, thousands upon thousands of South Africa's most at-risk citizens would be infected. This would be absolutely catastrophic. South Africa doesn't have the infrastructure to deal with that many infected, and it would mean that we would see thousands of deaths. That is why we as a nation are so proud of our president for enforcing a lockdown now, despite not currently having very high infection rates. But bishops from that church are still encouraging people to ignore the lockdown and gather anyway. This is extremely frustrating. My prayer is that God gives people the wisdom to follow the lockdown procedures and to isolate themselves in spite of feeling frustrated at the situation. I know everyone feels frustrated. This whole quarantine and needing to change my plans so drastically has cost me a lot of money. And as some of my friends and family knows, I'm currently living off of my savings because I'm trying to launch an art career. This is a very difficult time to launch an art career because there's a looming economic crisis and people don't want to be wasting their money on art stuff. I get that. I would feel the same, but yeah, it's hard for everyone, and we all need to cooperate and work together to get through this. Anyway, that is my little rant. It wasn't intended to be a rant from the start, but it kind of turned into one, and I'm happy I got it off my chest because I don't really have anyone to talk to, and while I am talking to my family and my friends via the phone or via video chat, it's still nice to be able to just get things out in the air. So, good luck to everyone who is watching this with their isolation, and let's unite together separately at home. Cheers for now.